And greetings. We are live and on demand here on BlazeTV radio and podcast. I am Steve Deace alongside Todd Erzin, Aaron McIntyre, and we hope maybe at some point, if the technology cooperates, Tim Young, conservative comedian extraordinaire, will be joining us for the Deace Group Roundtable. Obviously, this is not my normal set. This is not my normal sound. I believe this is called pulling the full Ben Shapiro, where you just Skype in to do your live show while you're out on the speaker circuit. I've never done that before, but I'm actually live in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, as we speak. So if you live in the North Carolina area, I'm going to be speaking at 3 places around the state over the next couple of days. All this information is all on my social medias. So look for Steve Deace on Facebook, MeWe, Parler, and Gab. Look for me as well at Steve Deace Show on Getter and Twitter, and the last name is Deace. All this information is there, but for those of you that don't have access to that right now, I'm speaking at a fundraiser. Take that to mean that you'll be asked for money. I'll be speaking at a fundraiser tonight at Prime Barbecue in Knightdale. That's just outside the Raleigh-Durham area. And then tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a couple of events. These are free to attend. But Faith and Freedom Coalition would ask that you would provide an online RSVP if you want to look them up online to do that. I'm going to be at the Soiree on South at 11 a.m. tomorrow in Aberdeen, and then the Clubhouse at Abington in Harrisburg at 5 p.m. tomorrow. So we're doing 3 different speaking engagements here in North Carolina while I'm here over the weekend. And again, all this information is up on the socials. If you want to get it from there, please feel free to come by and say hello. Todd, let's make sure you can hear me and everything okay there. How are you?
I'm good. Sitting in the big chair. What's going on?
Sorry, I had Todd's mic on, which happens to be your mic today. Sorry. And I'm trying to get a guest on right now, too, so sorry.
Well, that's no excuse, Aaron. You're only coordinating 4 things live at the same time.
I know.
We're juggling chainsaws here in Des Moines. I'm good. What's going on?
So I sound good to you?
Yeah, how's the trip?
The trip has gone fairly well. I mean, you know, it's fascinating flying without masks for the first time in 2 years.
Yeah, is there a different vibe? Are people just like dancing in the hallways?
There is a completely different vibe. I will say there was still about 25% of the people that I saw voluntarily wearing those chokers, the Chinese face diapers that don't work. I'd say 20-25% of people were voluntarily wearing them. But there is a dramatically different vibe, but it is still American airline travel, not American Airlines. You know, I avoid that as often as I can. It's still American airline travel. So, of course, there had to be a delay last night. So I didn't get in here until almost 1 a.m. last evening. So if I'm a little slow on the uptake, then there's the time change from Central to Eastern. If I'm a little slow on the uptake, I trust that the 2 of you can more than compensate for that. And so let's, of course, let you know it's a typical Friday program. We will get to Feedback Friday coming up in the second hour of the show. But let's begin, as we always do, with the Deace Group. Your weekly look at the week that was, brought to you first and foremost by our friends over at Freedom Project Education. I got to know these people personally. We were in the trenches together in the fight against Common Core about a decade ago. And from there, they went on and launched Freedom Project Academy. And I saw firsthand how good of an operation that is, because my own son was enrolled in there for a couple of years. So what I can tell you firsthand, here's what they teach you and your children. Critical thinking. How to think, not what to think, mastery of subject matter that matters, not spirit of the age, demonic propaganda. So if you want your children to be educated the way that the founders were, they have perfected it and done it via an online academy that you'll definitely want to check out. But hey, we're telling you about this now in the middle of May because spots are already filling up for the fall. So go to Freedom for School, that's FOR, freedomforschool.com to learn more and get a free information packet right now at freedomforschool.com. Let's get to issue 1 of our weekly look at the week that was. Bleep Lord Nefarious says.
University of Michigan proudly presents you the honorary degree Doctor of Science.
Ask your insights on when we will no longer call the current COVID public health emergency a pandemic. Are there criteria? Are there benchmarks? What kind of a process will we go through to make that determination?
No, there is really no firm, widely acceptable definition.
I now confer upon you, Anthony Fauci, the degree Doctor of Science, and admit you to all of its rights, honors, and privileges.
We didn't really understand the fatality rate. We didn't understand that it's a fairly low fatality rate and that it's a disease mainly of the elderly, kind of like flu is, although a bit different than that. It's pretty clear because young people don't get sick from the disease very often, that we probably, if we knew everything we know today, we would have shut schools down a lot less than we did during this pandemic.
You gotta be frustrated. I know. I can taste it.
Keep abortion safe and legal.
So I know that there's an outrage right now, I guess, about protests that have been peaceful to date, and we certainly continue to encourage that outside of judges' homes, and that's the president's position.
My mother didn't have a choice, so I'm here, but I had 57 years of misery. If she had a choice, she would have made different decisions, and I might not have been here, and nobody would have been wiser.
I believe in democracy, and I don't believe that the minority should have the ability to block things that the majority want to do. That's not in the Constitution.
Are of teenage women, particularly low income and often black, who aren't in a position to be able to care for children.
The biggest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically.
I'm telling them.
I would like to find out who the leaker is so I could make sweet love to that person, because that person is a hero to me. Okay? And if the leaker, a lot of people are saying it could be a conservative, if the leaker is a Republican, and if I get pregnant during our lovemaking, I will joyfully abort our fetus and let them know. I don't know if that answered your question.
Imagine laughing and smiling at that. Yikes. All right. Do we have Tim?
We do not. We're going to try Skype next.
Okay. Well, then, Todd, you get the first question. What made you most want to bleach your brain this week?
Well, I have the same reaction that you just had, Steve, to that, and it could easily be that. But go all the way back to the beginning. This is perfectly bookended. One of the things Aaron really does, and everybody should be paying attention, is he doesn't like randomly put this together on many days. There's an order to things, and I wouldn't be surprised if he bookended this way, because that ridiculous Karen on there heinously talking about killing babies and the audience thinking that's the funniest thing ever. The same thing happened at the beginning of his montage at the University of Michigan with Fauci up there and the clapping seals. Yay! His leadership during COVID was just as heinous, just as broken, just as utterly chaotic as what that woman just said. And the response from the University of Michigan, this has nothing to do with Steve and football or anything like this. It just happens to be Michigan. But one of the the Ivy League of public education, Michigan is there in the top 5. And the smart set there is clapping like trained seals for the so-called accomplishments of a man who should have been fired a long time ago and likely belongs in jail. Our education system is producing idiots and enemies of the state. And no matter what happens in the coming election here, that's the long-term problem, and no election is going to fix that in the near term.
I'll just piggyback off of what you said there about Fauci and the University of Michigan. People that are Gen X or boomers in our audience.
One, two.
There he is.
Yeah, we have Tim. All right, we'll go to him in a second. But people who are in our audience who are boomers, Gen Xers, so Todd, you and I's generation, and then our parents' generation, you guys, of course, remember the classic work of Rush Limbaugh, The Way Things Ought to Be, one of the greatest selling nonfiction books in the history of American publishing. And one of the figures that Rush mentions in that book, and that book was published in 1992, guys, 30 years ago is when that book came out. One of the names that Rush mentioned in his book, and he used to mention her on his program back in the day frequently, is the name Catherine McKinnon. Does that name ring a bell to you, Todd?
Catherine McKinnon. It does, but I'm not going to be helpful getting any further than that.
All right, well, Catherine McKinnon was the name of the law professor that Rush used to talk about back in the day, who taught her students, the feminist lesbian law professor who taught her students that all heterosexual sex is rape. Do you remember this now?
Yeah.
Including within marriage. It is an act of rape because it is an act of imposition and insertion by the male to violate the bodily autonomy of the female, even if it's consensual within a marriage. She taught this 30 years ago. Rush was talking about this, right? Think about it. This seems bat poop crazy in 2022, given everything we're talking about every day, right? That sounds crazy today. What did it sound like in 1992 when Rush was talking about her? I don't know that he ever actually mentioned, though, what university Catherine McKinnon taught law at. Todd, do you know? Yes.
Was it Michigan?
The University of Michigan, yes, is where Catherine McKinnon taught that to her students. Yeah, so I mean, this is you mentioned it. It is every year in the U.S. News and World Report rankings. It's a top 5 institution amongst public or top 5 college and university amongst public institutions every single year. It is the elite of public universities, and so this is nothing new. Josh McDowell, the great Christian apologist, once told me the only place he's ever been in the whole world, man, in the whole world, he's been to some hostile places preaching the gospel all over the world. The only place he truly felt like he might be unsafe was an event at the University of Michigan. By the way, Josh is a Michigan resident. Okay, so this is practically his home school. So this is not new. I mean, the great attorney Clarence Darrow, who represented the side of evolutionists in the Scope Monkey trial way back yesteryear. We're talking Inherit the Wind stuff. Where did Clarence Darrow go to school? The University of Michigan. So on the academic side, Michigan has certainly created its share of radicalist, secularist, and now nutty and Joseph Mengele-like professors, because other than being wrong about everything or being demonically right about everything, if you catch my drift, Anthony Fauci is certainly a swell dude. Now we'll go to Tim. Tim, I don't know how much of the montage you were able to see, so you can go off the grid if you want to pick something that just really made you want to bleach your brain this week.
Yeah, trying to connect to your show. That's obviously been an issue for me this week. That's really made me furious. By the way, I didn't think you could get sexier, Steve, but there you are in a hotel room. I mean, that's like every one of your viewers' Are they paying extra for this? Is the overtime today?
I want to make sure too, man. We scrubbed this room. I didn't want any moments like that chick on the BBC had a couple weeks ago, if you know what I'm talking about. So everything in this room was put away. There's nothing. We went over this thing with a fine-tooth comb for no embarrassing moments. Yes.
So you know who my person of the week, honestly, when I think about it, is Sean Hannity, who I got to tell you, man, that guy has shown his true colors with this Kathy Barnett, Dr. Oz thing. Number one, nobody should know like who Kathy Barnett is, but the establishment GOP has made it such an issue now with Rich Grinnell and Sean Hannity, and I'm sure we'll hear from Lindsey Graham because anytime Sean Hannity weighs in, his girlfriend's not far behind. And like I don't understand what they're losing their minds on this about. And I think that you would want somebody like a Kathy Barnett in Pennsylvania instead of a Mitt Romney with a grifty TV show like Dr. Oz. So I just don't understand, but he's showing his true colors as someone who will go with any kind of establishment TV hack instead of real human beings when it comes to elections. But I think we knew that from Hannity before when he was pushing the vaccines and everything else, right?
Amen. Very well said. Totally agree. Aaron, what say you?
Worst of the week, bowels of hell spewing forth. That was actually me prior to the show. Todd asked me, I guess probably booking another guest, do we still have the ability to do Zoom? And I was like, yeah, I would actually prefer that. It's just our studio is set up to do Skype, because every time we've used Zoom, it's been a little bit better quality than Skype. Just a mere breaths later, the computer that Zoom is on crashes. By the time I'm able to get it back up, Zoom will not launch and then tries to do an update. And I'm late getting the link to Tim once he actually does connect. We have some mysterious gremlins in the system. And that is the worst of the week. Me saying, yeah, praising anything the Chi-Coms do, like Zoom, is the worst of the week for me. I deserve it.
Lessons learned. Let's get to the exit question. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the odds that Sean Hannity will stop letting Lindsey Graham come on his show to get to the bottom of nothing, and 10 being the odds that Lindsey Graham enjoys being the bottom. Rank this week's level of total depravity. Tim.
10 ladybugs.
Nice. Todd.
Always 10.
Always 10. Aaron.
10.
Before we get to issue 2, I don't know if we can, well, Todd's a lot skinnier than me, so you can make the camera work around him. Speaking of Lindsey Graham, feast your eyes on what Taiga Coolers put together for me. I don't know if we've ever shown this for Tim yet, but Taiga Coolers does customized coolers. They did this customized Lindsey Graham cooler lid just for us in the show.
The top picture. I just saw the image at the top.
Yes. They did that. By the way, that was on their own. I had nothing to do with that. They did that completely on their own. All right. They're big fans of the show. They're a great company. They're America first, American employees, American parts. And what's more America than taking the cooler out in the summertime? They have such great products, and they can give you just a plain great cooler if you want. They can customize it for you if you want as well. They make for great gifts. And right now you can get 10% off with the promo code Steve, my first name, when you visit taigacoolers.com. That's TAIGA for taigacoolers.com, and use the promo code Steve at checkout to get 10% off. They might even make you that Lindsey Graham one if you ask. All right, let's get to issue 2, 180 days.
The midterm elections are about 6 months away, and we're already seeing red. The Real Clear Politics generic congressional ballot average currently has the GOP with a nearly 4-point lead. On May 16th of 2010, in other words, at this time in a similar environment over a decade ago, the RCP generic congressional ballot lead was just 0.3 of a point for the Republicans. But regardless of how things shake out in Congress, the midterms will be a referendum on the Biden administration. Back to the RCP average, it has Biden underwater in his approval rating by 11.5 points. The latest poll released this week from Monmouth has Biden underwater by 17 points overall, minus 31 with independent voters, minus 31 with 18 to 34-year-olds, and minus 50 with whites who have no college degree.
Same Monmouth poll, by the way, had the widest chasm between right track, wrong track in the history of the Monmouth poll. 19% of Americans saying we're on the right track, which I think just tells you now that's the percentage of Americans who are communists. 79% of Americans saying that we are on the wrong track. So, Tim, let's go to you with the first question here. The midterm elections, 180 days from today. What, if anything, can Democrats do to reverse the ominous trend lines that Aaron was just referring to?
You know, I think they have this really great strategy of destroying cities and burning them down. I think maybe if they can intimidate voters enough by setting towns on fire, maybe spray painting in the streets, don't vote if you're Republican, will kill you. That's probably their best bet at this point, and I don't doubt they'd do it.
Crazy voices.
Yeah. Listen, that's what they're going to do because they don't want to win this next election. They've been destroying domestically and internationally on multiple fronts. And the point is now to make things so bad to put the Republicans in control, where Republicans are often bad at controlling anything because they won't do what needs to be done. This cycle is exactly what the Democrats designed a long time ago, and it has worked. Their march through the institutions against a competitor that is far less an opponent than the Washington Generals against the Globetrotters. And listen, what we're going to get, this dominating win, hosannas and all that. And then the hard decisions are going to have to be made. And Republicans don't make hard decisions, and they don't know how to fight in the dark alleys. So yeah, just like Tim said, they're going to make things as bad as possible. Burn cities, kill babies, rail against Supreme Court decisions, fight in the streets, and they're going to lose terribly. And then they're going to I think it's beautifully ironic that Elizabeth Warren is sitting there talking about the minority and the majority, and she actually lost by a clean majority vote. But she is going to then, when in a minority, demagogue the hell out of issues, lie, cheat, steal, say it's all been the Republicans' fault all along. And unless something changes, it's gonna work.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren's lament, I'm glad you mentioned that, Todd. It reminds me of yesterday when the Washington Post ran a headline about George Washington University's name as problematic.
Yeah.
In the Washington Post, right? There is not even, the Democrats actually don't have a majority in the Senate. There are 50 Republicans, 48 Democrats. There are 2 independents that caucus with Democrats, and then Kamala Harris can break a tie as the vice president. So her argument, I mean, it fails on the level that you just mentioned, but it also fails on the level of she doesn't even know how many members of her own caucus she has in the chamber in which she represents. So Aaron, what do you think? What if anything, can Democrats do to reverse the trend line? And do you agree with Todd that this is on purpose?
Largely, no. Largely, I agree with both Todd and Tim. However, earlier this week, I got to thinking about this, and by using the same logic that Todd just laid out, why did they try tooth and nail, and why did they successfully steal the last election? Because the roots of the economic downturn that were laid and that we're reaping right now, they were sown during the Trump administration. And the more I follow that line of logic, I think it's because they were afraid he would actually successfully dig us out. He and his administration would successfully dig us out of the mess that they made. And they couldn't have that, because what we're witnessing here, and I've repeated this over and over again, what we're witnessing here is the Cloward pivoting of America. Cloward pivot, the strategy to tank the U.S. healthcare system in order to, build something new. And instead, we're watching that play out on a much grander scale. So it doesn't matter who's in charge, just as long as things keep grinding down. They're winning and they're happy. And that's what we're witnessing here.
Yep.
If you're new to the show, the Cloward Piven strategy that Aaron is referencing comes from Columbia University. Now, there was a school of thought established in Germany in the 30s called the Frankfurt School. And these were people coming out of the Weimar Republic who were hardened, committed Marxists, thought that was the only way to restore Germany to its prominent status. Then there was another group of fascists at the same time called the Nazis. And they were like, no, we kind of want to be the thugs around here instead. So they drove the Marxists out of that country so they could take over instead. And all this Frankfurt School did was just kind of export their ideologies to a few other universities around the world. One of them, a place called Columbia University there in the state of New York. Out of that came 2 professors that are married named Cloward and Piven. And they came up with a strategy in the 1960s. By the way, what university did Barack Obama go to?
That same one.
Same one. All right. And these 2 married professors named Cloward and Piven came up with a strategy in the 1960s. They did TV interviews and everything, like Margaret Sanger. They weren't hiding this. This was all out in the open. This is Klaus Schwab kind of stuff. They literally said they were going to do it. All right. And their entire strategy was to so overrun the social welfare safety net coming out of great society that Americans would now have no alternative, would think that capitalism, freedom is completely unattainable, and they would have no alternative but completely turn themselves over to a command economy. That was the strategy. That the waste, fraud, and abuse was not a bug, it was a feature. They did all of this on purpose, and that's what you're referencing. And our good friend Josh Hammer has a piece up today over at Newsweek where he is the op-ed page editor, and he's trying to wrestle with this. He's like, and Josh is a very smart guy. And he's like, I'm trying to figure out, is there ever been an administration in American history that did more to alienate people purposefully, that did more to stick with policies that have shown to fail purposefully? And I wrestled with that, guys, for a long time too, until I finally just gave myself over to Aaron's razor. One more time, Aaron, what is that?
It's just demonic, bro.
Yeah, it's just demonic, bro. That's just what it is. And you know, when you stop and think about it, Rules for Radicals is devoted to who?
Satan.
Lucifer. Yeah. Marxism is a literal satanic ideology. Literal. Okay. So, you know, it's not just cheeky. It's probably also true.
And there's, go ahead. Well, I just think there's no greater sign of our current circumstance as it applies to what you just said, is that Tim's backyard down there in Texas, we have the slogans of don't mess with Texas, but they are one of the states struggling. They can't feed their babies with baby formula right now. I mean, really, if there's really a don't mess with Texas and we really have red states, that doesn't happen because over my dead body does that happen. But all we have is the Republicans we have who constantly get defeated at every level.
Tim, I got to give you as a text in a minute to respond to that if you want to.
Well, I don't have any kids that I know of, so it doesn't directly affect me, but I can understand how that would affect other parents.
Let's get to the exit question. Tim, not eager to run to the defense of the Republican Party in Texas there, I see. Exit question.
No.
If the result of the midterm elections 180 days from today, if they were a rap song from the 1990s, which 1990s rap song would they be? A, Sabotage, Democrats steal another election. B, Mama Said Knock You Out, Democrats get knocked the bleep out. Or C, My Mind is Playing Tricks on Me, Democrats end up defying all the data and polls, end up pulling some Bill Clinton level of triangulation and moderate and win. What do you think? Aaron, you first.
B.
Mama Said Knock You Out.
Yep.
Okay. Tim, what do you think?
It's B.
B. Todd?
It's B, but parenthetically, Pyrrhic victory version.
We've got about, 2 minutes here, Aaron? Can I ask an exit bonus question?
Yes, we got 2 minutes. Yep.
Okay, exit bonus question. Tim, I'll go to you first. When the cameras are off and the Democrat intelligentsia is meeting and talking about these polling numbers and how things are looking in these midterms, what are they saying to each other, do you think? Tim, I'll start with you.
This will give us an opportunity to blame Republicans over the next 2 years and be able to set up a fighting chance for a better candidate to run against either Trump or DeSantis.
So that's kind of Todd. That's kind of.
There's no other answer than that. That's exactly right. It's Steve Deace spacebar. They're not afraid. They are not afraid of getting destroyed at a level that perhaps is probably going to be, Steve, you know this stuff. It's going to be historic, isn't it?
I think the Republicans could really win 70 House seats.
And they're not afraid of it. They're just fine.
Yeah. Aaron, what do you think?
I think something along that vein. I'm still holding out with 1 minute left. I'm still holding out that this might be used as an excuse to get rid of Joe. But even then, that doesn't necessarily run contrary to what Todd and Tim are saying. Even if Kamala takes over, they might not like her either. So just killed two birds with one stone, so to speak.
You wonder, would they have gotten rid of him if Kamala's numbers were not so poor? Going to her just seems like a desperate ploy and an obvious one. It doesn't do anything to inspire people, I think. All right, we'll come back. We're going to turn our attention to foreign policy because that's clearly what the two political parties care about a lot more than you not having baby formula for your children. We'll address that in a moment. You know, I've got people now emailing me asking me to put my real estate agent, Scott Remsburg, on the show as a guest to interview him for real estate tips. That's actually not a bad idea, but it's all because of, I last worked with Scott as a real estate agent 16 years ago, but he did such a great job that for the last 16 years, everybody here in my community that's come to me and asked me for an agent, I have recommended him, including Aaron. Okay. So everybody that's come to me, I like or care about, I just have complete trust in Scott, having gone through this with him. And that's what you're looking for when you get involved in the real estate market, especially during these unprecedented times.
Bing.
You are looking for an agent that you'll be recommending to your friends and family for years to come. Where would you find that kind of a person? Well, the name kind of says it all. Head over to the website, realestateagentsitrust.com. And this was a company started by some of Glenn Beck and some of his associates because they ran into real estate agents. They found out too late that they could not trust, and they don't want that to happen to you. So head to the website just about anywhere you want to move to or from here in the United States. realestateagentsitrust.com. Let's welcome back in conservative comedian extraordinaire, Tim Young here. He's our guest panelist for this week's weekly look at the week that was. Let's get to issue 3, Ukraine.
In the face of a severe baby formula shortage, new all-time highs for gas prices, continued historically high inflation, food processing plants from sea to shining sea apparently spontaneously combusting, and an overall economy either in or on the brink of recession, the U.S. House of Representatives this week voted to send $40 billion of aid to Ukraine. Of the 208 House Republicans, only 57 voted against the measure. Even on the Democrat side of the aisle, every single member of the squad, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, etc., voted in favor of the measure. Nowhere can you find the Ukraine fetish more strong than Congressman John McCain with an eye patch. This week, he accused Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of angling for a TV job with Russia Today after she voted against the measure. He also revealed the motive behind his and the rest of the swamp's fetish for warmongering with Russia, saying, quote, investing in the destruction of our adversary's military without losing a single American troop strikes me as a good idea. You should feel the same. I guess Ukrainians are just chattel to the globalists inside Washington. Senator Rand Paul blocked an effort in the Senate for quick passage of the bill until next week.
Also, Mitch McConnell saying that this is the most important issue. Everybody agrees, he says, that this is the most important issue in Ukraine. So, Todd, let me start with you. And when I put this together as the first question, it dawned on me, all the years I've been doing this, and you guys have now worked with me for I think 7 years for you, Todd, 6 years for Aaron. We've never really discussed this question. So let's discuss it now. Why do so many of the dominant politicians in both parties stand for other countries more than their own? I mean, if there was ever a time for AOC and Tlaib and Omar to do to the Democrat leadership what Newt Gingrich did to the Republican leadership in 1990 over Bush violating his no new tax pledge and using that essentially as the wedge against the establishment to set himself up for future political prominence, this would be the moment. I would imagine there's probably a lot of minorities that vote Democrat that don't give a bleep about Ukraine when they're playing dodge the bullet downtown Chicago every weekend. And yet almost nobody did. Almost nobody did. Why?
Actually, I think we have talked about this. It's just in a different vein. And Steve, what is it you always say about politicians running to do something versus be somebody? Listen, I think talking about international issues is like why a bunch of people end up taking, junkets as ambassadors to backwater countries. It makes them feel exotic. It feels like vacation. They're play acting. They talk about nations they've never even heard of and don't understand. But this is important. The light's on. They don't feel like that down walking in the inner cities trying to solve inner city problems. That's the ghetto. I didn't get into this for the ghetto. I'm a rock and roll star. I mean, really, it's the shallowest. Whatever, Steve, is the shallowest possible answer you can conjure in your mind and your soul. That's the one.
You just said this is the political elite version of virtue signaling, basically, is what you're talking about.
Yeah, they think they're on American Idol when they're talking about Ukraine. That's why all the flags are there. That's it.
What do you think, Tim?
I had to think of the word laundromat this week because I call it lavanderia. That's how long I've been a Texan now. I think it's because a lot of these foreign countries are a laundromat for their money, ultimately. I think that they're invested in the military-industrial complex. They're getting kickbacks from it. Not, if not the person directly, then their family. And we knew that about Ukraine with all of our top politicians, and it's both sides of the aisle. I think a lot of these countries, you get, an NGO or whatever over there, and you funnel your money through it. You funnel government money through it back to your friends and your family.
I like both of those answers quite a bit, Aaron. What do you say?
I have been rethinking our foreign policy a lot in recent days, or recent months, I should say, in light of what we've seen over the last couple of years, starting with COVID. And I'm more in line with Tim. Yeah, it's always, at least with the boomers forward, it's been a lot of, I feel important by making declarations about foreign countries and solving problems over there. It is very shallow, but I think if there is any substance behind what we're seeing now, and perhaps what we've seen post-World War II, it's that there is a cabal of people whose life is made very difficult by other nations seeing themselves as sovereign over their own affairs. Russia is one of those nations. Russia might be the only nation, actually, of consequence. I'm not saying that Russia is a good place or that Vladimir Putin is a good person. Neither of those things I don't think are true, certainly not the latter. But I think there is an overall impulse that there's a cog in the machine, or there's a fly in the ointment here. There's a misplaced cog with Russia. You don't see yourself as part of the global community. It's like I think the rest of the world sees Russia the way the Doctor sees the main character in Idiocracy. Why come you got a tattoo? That's what I think Russia represents in this context. That's what I think maybe has been represented in Iraq, in Afghanistan. We got to show you peons. You got to be a part of the global community or launder our. So I think right now, with Russia specifically, it's not that they necessarily think they're an evil empire. It's just you don't want to be a part of our new world order, essentially. Even if they won't say that, you got to go down. I think that's what's driving this, and maybe what's driving or been driving a lot of international conflicts post World War II.
It's a great answer.
That's a great answer too. I think all three of your answers were great, and I think absolutely all three of them tie in together. So then if I'm an average American voter watching or listening to this right now, what's my response to that?
Create your own sovereign country, basically. I mean, it's what we talked.
When you get pulled over by the cops, just call yourself a sovereign citizen
yeah, there
until you
you
can't
go.
get a ticket.
Yeah. No, it's what we've talked about as well. There's no excuse why an Iowa or a South Dakota or North Dakota or Texas shouldn't be as red as California is blue. Divorce yourself from the globalist cabal that's trying to run Washington, D.C. That's either easier said than done, but I think that's the path forward.
Well, and the average American is, again, citizenship is a job. You never get to sign it off on it and let somebody else do it in perpetuity. Otherwise, you end up right where we are now. William F. Buckley was not actually making a joke about the 50 random people from the phone book. That's actually a mathematical equation that is guaranteed to make this country better if you are willing to be one of those random people.
Then I think that there's another angle then based on all three of your answers, that asserting, because if everything that the three of you said is true, and I think that there's an immense amount of truth in all three of your answers, then there is a political calculation here by the system then too, in that asserting itself via these slates of issues disempowers us from doing what Aaron just suggested. You see what I'm saying, right? Okay. That, I think a lot of us were thinking about switching to Ukraine as the subject coming out of the failure of the COVID jabs and everything else, and the loss at the Supreme Court of the jab mandate, and how they just instantly flipped the script to Ukraine. But maybe it was also meant to change the subject from Ron DeSantis. I mean, other than the Disney groomer thing, you have not heard as much about what DeSantis is doing in Florida, because they've changed the perception of even what we're talking about to more of this globalist, internationalist viewpoint. Maybe I'm not explaining it well. Do you guys understand what I'm trying to say? Yeah. That even if these things are immensely unpopular, them changing the focus to them disempowers our focus from doing what Aaron is talking about. Well, any thoughts on that?
It's your book. They're always going on offense. Even if they're losing, even if it's a bad offense, it's still an offense, and most of our politicians, again, are the kind of people I said who are just looking for a spotlight, who are reactionary, who are incapable or disinterested in going on offense themselves. Of course, you're right.
Let's get to the exit question. 90 days from today, what is Ukraine's status as a country? Open-ended question. Tim, I'll start with you.
Well, they might have to wear masks if there's a new variant of COVID that comes out. You know, that should be warming up soon, right? But I believe we're going to be still in this standstill, and they will need another $60 billion.
So just a perpetual machine is basically what you're saying. All right. Todd?
Yeah, it's that. I can't imagine a different scenario, because this you too seem to codify right there that this thing has a yakety sax soundtrack that isn't going to end anytime soon.
Aaron, nice.
I think this is going to go on into perpetuity until somebody calls somebody else's bluff.
All right, let's get to our kicker question for issue 4. If you could force both parties to show bipartisanship, but on an issue that directly impacts the American people for a change, what issue would that be, and why? Aaron?
So any issue whatsoever. I can just pick any issue whatsoever.
Yes.
We're going to go with school choice. I think that would have a great deal of impact. I think that would allow market forces to come into play with our country's education system. And when there's competition, I think generally good things happen.
All right. Todd?
Mine was the exact same answer, and along with that, to show how serious we were about this, I would get rid of the School of Education, and at least in the very near term, no budget slashing, take whatever amount of money is allocated there, block grant it to the various states proportionally, and again, make these things truly be these experimental labs of education, and therefore you are left to reap the consequences of your experiments if they go bad.
Tim?
Why is everything always so deep on this show, Steve? Jeez. I just, I want them to come together and make sure that the Zoom connection works when I get in here. I mean, obviously, Aaron and I have the same issue with it. It's been a problem. But, I mean, really, inflation. I think inflation is the thing. I think we need to stop printing money. I think if I could make them come together on one issue, it would be balancing the budget. We start from there.
Predictions. Todd, go.
Oh, my goodness. My prediction is that the fall school board meetings will once again be a proxy for national politics, and particularly the coming election. So September and October, you are going to have a lot of people protesting. We just had it in Linn-Mar, Iowa here regarding the usurping the rights of parents regarding transgenderism. That is going to be full throat in September and October.
Aaron?
I've got Golden State over Milwaukee in the NBA Finals. I've been actually following the NBA Finals this year. It's been really entertaining, actually.
There you go, Tim. You wanted something more shallow, and Aaron delivered for you. There you go. What's your prediction?
No, I think we're going to see a new crop of leaders. I really like the prediction that school board meetings are going to be the battleground, the early battleground. And by the way, that dude that keeps going and acting out at the school board meeting, can you stop? Can you, I forget his name. Like, the first one was cute. It's old now. That needs to stop. Stop annoying. And he's going to conservative city council meetings. Stop it. Please stop. Let real people go to these things now.
I kind of love it. I do.
Well, Steve, no. Here, Steve, I want you to, then you and I need to get in a room and I'm going to play all 35 of these things that he's done. And by about number 8, you'll be like, please stop, no more. This is torture.
There's a lot of things, if you made me do them 35 times in a row, I'd probably tell you, please stop, this is torture. You're right. My prediction is that in protest of the leak of the draft majority opinion on Roe v. Wade, Chief Justice John Roberts will actually end up joining the majority to overturn it. If for no other reason than to defy the attempt to undermine his precious institutional integrity idol that he holds so dear. That is my prediction. That it will end up being a 6-3 decision now.
That's a good one. Yeah. That's a good one. I can see that. I can see it not happening, but I can definitely see it happening.
It's the most Roberts-y move, right? There's no basis in truth behind it. There's no validity to it. It's not a deeply thought through issue. It's just all this, and political gamesmanship and statesmanship and house of cards craftsmanship. There's no constitutional scholarship behind it. To me, it's the most John Roberts of plays. In a strange way, I'd actually respect him more if, in spite of this, he actually stuck to his original mamby-pamby, watered-down viewpoint, because that would be one of the most consistent trains of thoughts that John Roberts has had as the Chief Justice of the United States over the last going on 20 years. So there you go. Tim, good to see you as always, brother. God bless. All right, take care.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. We'll come back. Hour 2 is coming up, and Feedback Friday coming your way. Your turn to take over the conversation when we return. And we are back with hour number 2 here, live and on demand on Blaze TV radio and podcast. If I sound and look a tad different, it's because, again, I'm on location. I'm speaking around the state of North Carolina here this weekend. If you want all the information on that, I'm doing a fundraiser tonight in the Raleigh-Durham area. I keep saying that, area. Raleigh-Durham area. Okay. And then a couple of places, including the Charlotte area, tomorrow. All that information, if you live here in North Carolina, you want to come by and say hello. The 2 events I'm doing tomorrow are free of charge via Faith and Freedom Coalition. You can just go to all my social networks right now, and I've got all that information posted for you. Just look for Steve Deace on Facebook, MeWe, Parler, and Gab, at Steve Deace Show on Twitter and Getter. And don't forget that you can get clips of the show that are both free to watch and free of censorship whenever you head over to rumble.com/Steve Deace Show as well. And as we do each and every day at this time, we want to thank all of you that do this via the podcast. Please, if you have yet to do so, leave us a 5-star review, and then also hit the subscribe or follow button. Thousands of you have done that for us already. We appreciate each and every one of you, and every day we just want to say thank you for doing that. Another thing that I want to do, because we appreciate you, is give you a good recommendation with a product that is part of my daily regimen. I take it with me wherever I go. Went and worked out this morning here at the hotel gym. And then, like I do when I'm at home, I took my post-workout recovery. Part of it is Omega XL. That's a part of my daily regimen, particularly as we get older, folks. Our joints just become, they're not just for flexibility and activity and mobility any longer. Unfortunately, it can also become little hubs for inflammation. And that's what's likely causing that pain and stiffness in your joints, which manifest as that achiness and soreness that just won't go away in your back, your knees, your hip, your neck. That's where Omega XL comes in, an all-natural anti-inflammatory, backed by going on 3 decades of clinical research and now 3 years of me using it every single day. I'd highly recommend this product. You can get it right now. Buy one, get one for free. When you visit omegaxl.com/Steve, that's omegaxl.com/Steve, or you can call them at 800-844-4888. That's 800-844-4888. All right, we welcome back in Todd and Aaron as well. Gentlemen, you ready to get some Feedback Friday?
Yes, let's do this.
All right, let's get through as many of these as we can, which means probably 2. Let's begin with Barry Savitz. He writes, the only good thing about abortifacients being sold at Amazon, as you guys revealed to me this week on the show, is it again proves we do not need Planned Parenthood anymore. So just defund it completely. After all, if you can do, and then you can have all of your abortions through the United Nations if you want. Time to shut down all funding for Planned Parenthood. If I can get what they do everywhere else, why are we funding them at all, even beyond the morality of this situation? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, the same is true of getting rid of teachers' unions. So you have to beg the question, what is their primary reason for existing, if not for what they claim to do? And it's because they are political advocacy arms. They do the heavy lifting and electioneering for one party and one party only.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a clever topic of debate, or a clever way to debate this, and a snappy talking point in terms of practicality of it. You know, I'd love to see some state legislatures, or maybe somebody at the national level just launch a bill. Hey, alternatives already exist for these things. Why? You know, we're not funding abortion at the national level, so why are we giving any money to Planned Parenthood whatsoever if alternatives can be found elsewhere? I think that I would like to see leftists' reaction to that.
Glad you went there, Aaron, because this is why I selected Barry's email and put it atop the list. Because I'm a messaging guy, I'm a strategy guy, as you guys know. That's my niche, that's my background professionally in this arena, on top of, you know, doing content. And I thought that was very clever messaging by Barry. And it made me kind of jealous. I'm like, damn, I maybe should have thought about that myself. I thought, and I like it when our audience thinks ahead of us. I like it when they get ahead of us and I'm thinking through these kinds of angles and ways to turn arguments and turn phrases and put it back. Because what he points out is that it's just there, really, for what you said, Aaron and Todd. It's just there from a political posture standpoint. There's nothing I couldn't get everywhere else. If it's so common now, I can get abortifacients on Amazon, which it is. And it reminds me, you know, a totally different slate of issues, but just to show you there was never any such thing as socially liberal, but fiscally conservative was always a canard, never existed. There's like 1% of voters that this applies to, okay? Just to prove this actually is what was behind Too Big to Fail with the crash in 2008. The old hard money and soft money in the old days of funding, that there was a limit on what you could give to an individual campaign, but there was no limit to what you could donate to the political parties themselves. And some of their biggest donors were these lending houses, were these banks, these central banks, these central creditors that by rights, many of them or several of them should have gone under for their business practices. But remember, they were deemed too big to fail, right? You guys remember this? Too big to fail really meant snap, man. I mean, if these guys go under, who's cutting those massive 7- and 8-figure soft money checks to the RNC and DNC? That's what it really meant.
Yep.
It's a symbiotic relationship. All right. So these institutions help subsidize the political parties. The political parties use their power to basically indemnify them from the liability that they deserved to face. And in exchange for indemnifying them, the subsidy continues. In exchange for the subsidy continuing, so does the indemnification, right? That's essentially what we're talking about here. Just gangster government, basically, right? That's what we're talking about.
I got nothing but disgusting agreement with that.
Same.
And probably thoughts you can't say because they would get us completely deplatformed everywhere,
Yes.
I would imagine. You're right. And I think everybody has those thoughts, so let us move on. All right. Brian in Minnesota says, here's a simple mental test on transgenderism. I challenge everyone to walk into any hardware store and tell the clerk you need a repair end for a garden hose. The clerk will ask, do you need a male or female end? You reply, I'm not sure what the end identifies as. I know the clerk will give you the look of, we need to call the Keebler elves of in the white coats to put you on the disoriented express to get you to the Motel Lunatic for a rubber room. So along the same lines, I like this. Our people, guys, they're picking it up. They're figuring it out. They're learning how now to actually make these arguments, and they're thinking of stuff. This is another one. I should have thought about this one. Never even dawned on me that this is just the common male-female argumentation on virtually every aspect of society, right? And this is a very common one. What would happen if you walked in and said, well, I'm not sure, I don't want to identify the ends, the ends of the instruments as male or female. I mean, that would make me a bigot. I thought this was another very clever, snotty, smart take from Brian in Minnesota.
It is clever, but remember, and I firmly believe it, it doesn't mean stop argumentation, but we are post-argument. 1 + 1, they will proudly say it equals cucumber, and you can't talk them off that wall, and mocking them may make them mad, but it won't shame them. Minus the shame that will lead to repentance. That's why being post-argument, it is what are you prepared to do territory. I mean, we've got the funny arguments. We've got the logical arguments. We've got the simple arguments. We've got them all. Steve, I'm summing up again what you said about yourself and why, one of the reasons why you went on MSNBC at all. You wanted to see what in the arena, what the arguments were, what the capacities to make the arguments were, and it turned out there was no there.
I agree with what Todd said in terms of this won't shame the people wielding this ideology, Aaron. But I absolutely think, and maybe you agree or disagree, we'll find out. I absolutely think, though, there's a lot of Americans that are neutral third parties on this stuff.
Right, and that's where I was going to go.
Yeah, and I think they absolutely can be embarrassed into signing on to such utter dumbassery.
Yeah, so the reality is, going back to Bleep Lord Nefarious said this week, Dr. Fauci, the same week that he's presented with an honorary degree of science, very broad, vague term, an honorary degree of science from the University of Michigan, lauded by that crowd of clapping seals at one of the foremost educational institutions in the United States, the very same week that he receives that, he is asked, what's a pandemic? You're the nation's foremost virologist, immunologist, epidemiologist. And his answer was, we got strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate. That's his answer. But yet, the very same week, he was lauded by clapping seals. That's what Todd means by post-argument. However, to your point, the snappy messaging like this absolutely can be used to provoke them to show their butts, to provoke them to show how crazy they actually are, so that we'll find out whether or not it's true that there are a lot of third parties, bystanders in America, which I happen to think that there are, but whether or not that's true, using these tactics can force the crazies to out themselves, and we'll find out one way or the other how many people are actually crazy and how many people actually hate the crazy.
Tell me what you guys think of this statement. If I said, at this stage of America's cultural devolution, I am not attempting to evangelize the mob outside of Lot's house as much as I'm trying to isolate it. It's a contagion. I'm trying to stop its spread. And hey, I would absolutely love it if in that process, even one of them woke up and said, wow, this is dumb. I'm leaving. But ultimately, I'm trying to do cultural triage at this moment, and I'm trying to isolate them as the ridiculous, foolish cult that they actually are. And that's why these sorts of snarky, clever forms of arguments do prick the conscience of those who might be inclined to go with who they think has the mo. to kind of go along to get along and sign on to things that they are like, I don't know if this is smart, but I don't want to. Let's not rock the boat, right? Okay. And what I'm trying to do is at this stage of our cultural devolution, get the attention and prick the conscience of those who might be largely passive, but not in agreement with the spirit of the age yet, in order to provoke them from joining its ranks. If I said that that was what I was thinking strategically at this moment, how would you guys respond?
Well, that's along the lines, and I agree with it, of what you said earlier this week about the importance of provocation, provoking the fight. I can't remember the specific context earlier this week, but I agree entirely. To rile up, to get things to the next obvious stage to the most people, so we can get real. And again, this is important to me because, as you know, I think it's vitally important that we get all manner of people, particularly the men of this country, out of their current largesse, their comfort zones. They're drunk on it. It's their crack. They think in terms of nostalgia and Americana and things that simply cannot last. I mean it existentially certain that these things cannot last if the men in this nation continue to sit by and not understand what's at stake and how quickly the game will be up if we do not enter the arena. So yes, if the argument is made to provoke rather than to believe that you can speak in dulcet tones and the person is arguing with equal levels of authenticity across the aisle from you, because if you believe that, you're just a sucker and you deserve to lose. But if you are really trying to provoke the next phase of the great drama of returning the second wave of the American Revolution, I'm in.
Yeah, what you're describing on a larger scale is what DeSantis and the Florida legislature did with Disney, because now in the last couple of weeks, we had a large PR firm that represents and advises several, multinational brands telling their clients, okay, pump the brakes on the woke stuff here, at least for a little bit. Pump the brakes on this. Disney, have you heard a peep out of them since this happened? I just saw, Daily Wire has a story on this. Netflix has come out with a new culture memo for their company, and they said, no more. If you have a problem working on content that offends you, you can go find another job. They fired the dude pretending to be a woman or vice versa who led the employee walkout over the Chappelle comedy special. Now, it may be a little too late for them, judging by the state of their stock prices right now. But that's what I think on a larger scale, on a macro scale, kind of what you're talking about. A line is drawn. No, you're not crossing this. We're going to F with you if you do. And Disney crossed that line. And now they are thoroughly, a message was sent. So I think what you're describing here is on a smaller scale, already been played out in Florida.
Great point. So what we're also saying then is we actually are trying to get this to go to its lot. We're trying. You want an analogy? I'll give you one. We are trying to get this bat coronavirus that we are operating on in a lab, we are trying to provoke it to its next stage of evolution on purpose, if you get my analogy. Yeah. That's what we're doing here. We want that thing to radicalize and go where it really wants to go anyway, where it's dying to go anyway, but we want it to do it on our timetable.
Yeah.
For the culture has been anesthetized to the previous stage of devolution already, and all the institutions have come in line. And now everybody's like, well, I guess that's the new normal. I'm not going to do it, but I don't want to be the one bigot in the room. Speaking of bigots, so I'll just keep my mouth shut. No, we are actually the Ralph Barracks now. Okay, we are actually in that lab provoking this contagion to spill over to its next stage of microevolution. But in this case, it is so that people can actually see in its natural habitat what it ultimately wants to do to you as a person, to your family, to your culture and your country, before it has all of its narrative set up in order to force the most of the culture to comply with it, even if they find it nuts. That's kind of what we're saying here now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And And in another context, we've talked about the Karening of the Democrat political class, how the statistics show that they're even doubling down, gain more percentage points in the direction of Joe Biden and the Democrats' policies. But listen, that's happening in the vacuum I talked about male leadership. If men are called to be and answer that call, what they are truly supposed to be, we don't have this problem, and so it's important to identify that statistically as something that's really going on. But the antidote is in our hearts; it's in our chests, and we need to do something about that.
Amen. Well said. Before we continue on with Feedback Friday, Aaron was just mentioning what's going on with Woke Flicks and what's happened to their stock. They've lost hundreds of thousands of subscribers. So maybe some of these corporations will begin to wake up. But that doesn't mean, though, that we still don't need to transform the marketplace, because there's still way too much of the subsidizing of this crazy coming from corporate America. That's why when there's an opportunity to do business with partners that share your values and aren't actively out there trying to end your way of life, take full advantage of it, like there is with our friends over at Patriot Mobile. Our family finally made the switch last fall. Like a lot of you, we're like, this is going to be a big hassle. Will it make that much of a difference? Finally, we had just seen enough from corporate wokeism that we were like, no matter how big of a hassle it is, let's just go ahead and do it. And they did a great job making it as seamless for us as possible. So I know they can do that for you as well with their outstanding US-based customer service team, with really the same coverage you got from your major provider before, because everybody uses the same towers these days. But now you know that you're not directly giving money to people that hate you. If you want to make the switch right now, if you're a veteran or first responder, let them know when you give them a buzz, and they'll give you extra savings as a way of saying thank you. For everybody else, you can get a free activation code right now when you type in Steve with the offer code Steve. When you go to patriotmobile.com/Steve, that's the offer code Steve at patriotmobile.com/Steve, or call them at 877. Let me make it simple for you. 972-PATRIOT. Call them at 972-PATRIOT. That works as well. All right, let's get to this note from Janet, guys. Janet says, I find it interesting that my oldest daughter needs a religious exemption for the jab to work at a hospital. However, my other two daughters can teach in the public schools in the same county, and there is no jab or religious exemption requirement. There is no mention of it at all upon being hired. Both institutions have equal staffing shortages at the moment. How do we explain this? So, gentlemen, how do we explain it?
Well, the heightened hostility, the cult of, God knows we've seen a cult of personality within hospitals, unlike anything we could have predicted. And as Steve has hinted at, he's working on something that's going to, blow your mind when it comes to that. But Steve, what are you regularly calling the schools these days? Satan's Youth Ministry? Yeah.
Yes.
There's just that. Look at what the grooming going on there. It's clearly overrun more of the people there. It's been, and let's quite frankly, in the schools of education, it can. You don't need to be a PhD to be a really good teacher in any number of subjects. You need to, like kids, like the subject matter, but a bachelor's degree is just fine for teaching chemistry or for teaching English or for teaching U.S. history. And that's actually been part of this grift this whole time, is that hyping it up into this expertise and all this stuff. And that's how you get this other stuff. So everybody feels smarter than it couldn't just be what it is. Whereas in the hospitals, listen, all that BS being said, and every word I'm saying it, I'm thinking what Steve is working on in the back of my head and how this is going to, the gap is closing. for sure. But you do have to get PhDs in order to be a really good surgeon. You just have to be doing more time doing real stuff, cutting people open, trying to cure cancer. There should be less opportunity for distraction. So I think that might speak to why this is the case.
So I think there's, just going off of kind of anecdotal stories and experiences, I think there's two different factors at play. I have a friend, a close friend of mine, who works as a PE teacher in one of the probably smallest schools in Iowa. Two of the biggest things that when we talk and catch up and see how work's going, two of the biggest complaints that I've heard from him the last couple of times is the gender stuff. This is a rural, small Iowa school. There's some kid there who requires her, I can't remember, own private space for changing. And that's a headache for my buddy to try to arrange. That stuff, and the parents of kids, and the kids themselves. Parenting like Todd or Steve, or what I was blessed to grow up with, or what my wife was blessed to grow up with, and what I'm sure exists in our audience right now, parenting like that is just not the norm. The kids, you would think it would be different in a small, rural Iowa school, but it's not. The kids are difficult, some of them, to deal with. And that really, if that's the way it is at a school like that, I don't know what it's like. And I'm sure Todd could probably testify to the same. So you are, in that context, you are like the police officer in the broader context. You are the cartilage between chaos and some form of order and rest and peace. Working as a teacher, because your job is not easy. So I don't think it's as alluring as a job as it once was, unless maybe you're in it for other reasons. With the hospitals as well, the vaccine, I think, is a big thing. The jab is a big thing. So that's a big thing, along with being overworked. At least in the hospital systems that I'm aware of here in Iowa, the staff largely is overworked because there is a staffing issue, and there's a staffing issue because the staff is overworked. Secondarily to that, with the traveling nurse phenomenon that really began to take off in 2020, these traveling nurses can get paid a heck of a lot more than those who just stay at their job. And so why am I staying here getting paid less than a traveling nurse who can sometimes make upwards of 1 to 1.5 times as much as I'm making right now? That's a big problem as well. So underpaid, overworked, that's kind of the main thing.
One more thing to make my point, and Aaron helped bring it to life, is that before COVID, and we've had criticisms of nurses, we've been complimentary of nurses in the proper context, the TikTok videos, that being annoying and things like that. But remember, before COVID, as it applies to vaccination, one of the most skeptical professions of vaccines was nurses. And that speaks to my point about there's just a level. If you take that group of people and the current TikTok group of teachers, I think the teachers are just further over the ledge. Now, maybe the nurses want to sprint to catch up now after COVID. I pray to God not. But that was kind of what was behind my answer.
I remember seeing along those lines, Todd. I remember seeing last year estimates from several major medical systems and/or studies, anywhere of 10 to 25% of doctors and nurses at these institutions were not getting the jab.
Right.
Which means they're dramatically outnumbered. Okay. But 10 to 25%, you're the committed anti-vaxxer here, right?
Yeah.
You guys don't represent, you might by the time COVID jabbing is over. Okay.
Right.
But you guys don't represent 10 to 25% of the population. Do you think that much?
Oh, definitely not 25. I mean, it's been growing. I mean, we may be...
They're growing it for you. No question about it.
Yeah.
I mean, they keep on this, they're going to add me to their ranks here in another 3 months, the way this is going. But the reason, here's why I bring that up. If there is a higher proportion or ratio of jab or in general vaccine skeptics at the highest levels of direct personal health care,
right,
outpaces the public in general, what does that say? And that can also be one of the reasons why they're so demanding of this, is they know what it says. That I think all this has been about conditioning you for a never-ending series of injections as treatments going forward, rather than medications, primary care physicians. It's just all utilitarian. The national guidelines say this is the injection for this, so we inject you with that and we move on. I think that's what this has all been about. And if you've got a higher proportion of the people that would either prescribe these or administer them, if there's a higher proportion of them that are skeptical of these products within the industry themselves or itself compared to the public at large, then eventually the public at large is going to catch up with that, and you lose control of your narrative and the agenda. And that's why they have to force it at this level. Thoughts on that real quick?
So say we all. I can't believe you say things like that in the last 2 years. It's just phenomenal what's happened to the world, that Steve Deace is a megaphone that would have been just Todd Erzen's before.
I'm just doing observational science, man. I'm just paying attention to the last 26 months. That's all. We'll come back with more Feedback Friday here in a moment. Well, something else I always take with me when I'm on the road these days, Built Bar. And that's not easy to do, man, because these things are all covered in real chocolates. You want to make sure they don't melt. But I find that if I put it towards the bottom of the suitcase, a little thermal insulation from the clothes, and they come out absolutely perfect. When we took our anniversary trip to Vegas last month, and now here in North Carolina to do some speaking over the weekend, I dug into the pumpkin stash. Remember, guys, I bought a whole bunch of the pumpkin puffs towards the end of the Halloween season to make sure I'd have enough to last me throughout non-pumpkin season. Whenever I've got a Jones that I've got to fix and I need a little Dr. Feelgood, well, I brought the pumpkin spice Built Puffs with me, but all of their flavors are great. They're all covered in real chocolate. It's the best tasting healthy snack you've had in your entire life, I promise you, at least from a protein bar standpoint. Texture and flavor that rivals a lot of the candy bars on the market, but without the calories and the carbs and the sugar grams you don't want and you're not looking for. Almost all of these flavors are 140 calories or less. What they call decadent might be 170 calories. You won't believe how good these are. Get 10% off right now with my last name, Deace, D-E-A-C-E, as your promo code when you go to built.com, B-U-I-L-T, for built.com. Get 10% off your order right now for Built Bar at built.com, promo code Deace. All right, guys, let's continue on with some Feedback Friday. This is from Adam Levitt. I'm not sure yet whether I should thank you guys or curse you out, but I thought I'd drop you a line and let you know that you guys are changing things with your show. Wisconsin's spring election was on April the 5th, and that's when new school board members are elected. Thanks to constant reminders like the answer is us and let's find out, I decided to run for my local school board along with two other challengers for the 3 seats that were up for re-election. 2 of us, me being one of them, unseated those incumbents, bringing our board to 3 of 9 being solid conservative members. I waited to send this email because I only won my race by 6 votes. And I was expecting a recount to be called for, but it never came. And so I was sworn in on April the 25th. I am concerned about the amount of work we can actually get done to reverse course on harmful curriculum, to prevent COVID policies from ever being re-implemented again, and to address the number of other issues facing our district. But I take comfort knowing your show and others I frequent will continue to be beacons of hope in dark times. P.S. If Todd has any tips or advice from his experience dealing with his local school board, please let him know. I would appreciate any pointers he might have time to offer. And again, that is from Adam Levitt, and well done, Adam. Well done, good and faithful servant. So Todd, do you have any advice for him?
Oh, well, first, you're right. You're going to lose all the time. So that just get used to that. But the winning comes in provoking all the right fights and letting people know that you cannot be seduced like some high school teenager at the lock-in, where they bring in the hypnotist, because they're gonna. We're all here for the children, and they're gonna speak in these tones, and we're gonna make sure that we preserve decorum. And no. You get your point out. You don't care. You're not there to make feel good about themselves and their inner child. Certainly the adult sitting next to you. And all of the so-called policy that they have, I guarantee you, I've seen it with my own eyes. They're happy to ignore their own policy whenever they want to. And it's like the federal, when you have right now Elizabeth Warren talking about what's constitutional or not. She doesn't care about what's constitutional. She only cites it when she thinks it helps her. You're going to be surrounded by people like that, both the people that were elected that think differently from you, and certainly the bureaucrats in that school system. If you make enemies of a lot of these people, that's a sign you're doing things right. If you're not making some enemies with them, don't go out of your way. But listen, this is just going to be unavoidable. If you're doing this thing right, you're going to have some people that really, really don't like you.
The constant drip, 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 especially at the local level of somebody like Todd, confronting, showing up, it has an impact long term. Either that person is just going to get so tired of Todd, or hopefully multiple Todds, that they will move on and do something else. The school board member or what have you, local city council member. Or they will just get so fed up with you that they will decide that the policy that they're pursuing or the measure they're pursuing is not worth the drip, drip, drip overall. So it is having. So Todd is right from what I've seen anyway as well. Lose a lot, but outcomes like that. What do we say? They're up to God. Our duty, our responsibility to our country, ourselves, but first and foremost as men, your family, is showing up. Showing up. That's where it's at. If you've done that, I think, I don't want to say you've done your job, but that's like 60%, 60 to 75% of the job right there.
Yep. You nailed it. Both of you nailed it. In a way, Adam, what you imagine if cults had to have elections to be on their cult board, right? They don't, but this one does, because it still has to embody the notion of it being a public institution. So Todd, tell me if this is too strong, but essentially Adam just got elected to the board of a cult.
Yes.
Okay. Then going in, know that, and so you need that mindset, I think, Adam, to do what Todd just said. It's a cult. Like if you were elected to the board of Hale Bob, and when they were convinced that on this date in 1998, they were going to have to poison themselves if the comet didn't come, you wouldn't follow decorum, right? You wouldn't follow tradition. You'd be like, hey, dude, stop. First of all, bowl haircuts are for when you're 6, number one. And number 2, put down the hemlock, loser, right? You'd speak up. You would not just go with decorum and hushed tones or institutional cohesiveness. You'd be like, this stuff's bat poop crazy, and these people need to be stopped from, first of all, from harming themselves first on top of others, right? That's how you'd behave if you knowingly acknowledged going in, wow, this is a cult, right? You would do that, right?
Right.
You need to do that with this. It's not a school board. It's Hale Bob. It's a cult. So you're there to disrupt. You are there to turn over money changers. You are a disruptive presence. That's why you're there. From the very beginning, a disruptive presence. You will not abide. Now, you have to be rude about it, but Daniel, even while being polite, said, no, I know, listen, you guys castrated me against my will. No, I will not eat your unclean food. I'm just not doing it, but thanks. Just not going to do it. Not going to comply.
Yeah. You have no, as a school, right? And as a school board, member, you have no authority as a lone individual. You have no power. Your power comes in the total vote, which is why you're just going to have to get along losing.
Or the defiance is where your power comes as well.
Yes, you are. You get to see how all the sausage is made. You are a citizen. Every citizen is privy to all the public records. But there you are. It has to be fed you, and you are now. You are a whistleblower, and blow that whistle loud, brother. Blow it loud.
What you just said is so key. When in my old WHO local radio days, I originally thought the reason the Republican establishment hated me so much is because I was making such potent and persuasive arguments against them. But that was just my Southern Hemisphere and my ego talking. The reason they really hated me, I mean, lots of people do that. They just call us blowhards and ignore us. You know why I found out later why they really hated me. It's because there were people in that caucus who agreed with us, who were one of us, but just had kept quiet, like Jim Gordon in Batman Begins. I'm not a snake. I'm not going to rat you out, but no, I'm not on the take. I'm not like you guys. But then he says, but who would I rat to in this godforsaken town anyway, right? Remember when he said this, right? Okay. There were a few of us in that caucus already before I even got on the air. There was just no one to rat to. There was no one to talk to. I gave them the platform. They would come out of those caucus cloakrooms at the legislature and literally call right into the hotline of my show and tell the people of Iowa how the party was scheming to screw them on this issue. They put the amount of sunlight they put on this blew their minds. That's what they hated.
Yep.
They hated the exposure. They didn't hate my argumentation. They hated the use of the platform of exposure. You now have that, is what Todd is saying.
Yeah. Why do you think one guy, they got rid of 3 Twitter accounts at a school district? Because I used them. Same thing. Use that voice in every way you can.
That's well said. Kate in New Jersey, I think, speaks for almost everyone in this audience with this. The deep state or bureaucratic hellhole that really runs our lives and wastes our tax dollars has become the cultic epicenter of the spirit of the age, and it lures new followers in with the promise of power and prestige, even if it's just a little piece of the pie. Not surprisingly, though, they actually embody the majority of the people that we have elected into office across both parties for many years. Those who go to Washington not to do something, but to be somebody. Because even if they turn out to be a nobody, the perks that comes with getting into that power center, as in the money, is just too good to give up by opening their mouths. So they'll never abandon that sacred cow. They are on two sides of the same demonic coin. That's 100% correct. And that's why I feel and have this sense of urgency. Kate and all of you who think like this, which I don't know if you are watching or listening to a show like this, how you could not to some degree, because it's tragically obvious. And there's only 2 ways a story like this ends. One of 2. Revival or bust. Revival or bust. Those are the only ways that this wins, or ends, I should say. It doesn't end any other way. And that's why those 2 things are the focus of our show. Revival, that's where the biblical worldview comes in. And then bust. This is where my concern is, if that feeling of helplessness, hopelessness, if we start to embody that, we create John Browns. Or we create Bull Runs and Fort Sumters and Bunker Hills. Now, those are some moments of great history, but understand, more Americans died in the Civil War than every other war this nation has fought combined. More Americans died in Antietam than in any singular battle in the history of this country. And we have a peaceable means, as we were just discussing with Adam's note, to aggressively but peaceably. We are urging Adam to be aggressive but peaceable, but aggressive but peaceable, or meek, power under control. Not weak, meek. Aggressively peaceable in confronting this. We have a limited window. How limited that window is, I don't know. I don't know if that window is limited as this. I don't know if it's that. I don't know. I just know it's limited. It's not endless because of the track we're on. And unfortunately, we're up against a spirit of the age that will not be satiated. It will not be controlled or contained. It will only be defeated. And that is my fear, is that we will not take advantage of this limited window we have right now, and bust it is then. That's my fear. Because every syllable, Kate, of what you wrote here is true. And it's actually been true for a while. It's just, I think, we're more willing to acknowledge this truth than we have been before. Gentlemen, you have any final thoughts here in the final minute or so of the show?
I just think we haven't mentioned this all day, and it's kind of been the elephant in the room. But we only, as you were talking about, limited windows of being able to, change the course of history. There are only limited windows when greatness comes before you, and you don't know it in the moment, but then in the aftermath, you're like, well, we just witnessed history. And I think it's important to, I want to say eulogize, she's not dead yet, but recognize the greatness that is the one redheaded spinner of yarn known as Jen Psaki on her last day. Greatness, the spirit of the age has used her to lie and obfuscate and to divide just about as well as, or badly, as anyone I have ever seen. And today is her last day as White House press secretary. And I just thought it's good to take a moment to take stock of just how great of a liar she has been.
It's funny. I used to be a great fan of the show The West Wing. And one of the most popular characters was the press secretary, C.J. Craig, played by a great actress who her name's escaping me now, but she's gone on to plenty of other things. You know who she is. But one of the themes is just how important it was to honor the duty of holding up the truth and understanding there's some tension there, but to take care of the press corps because they're doing their job, to take care of her boss, the president, to take care of the American people. That's in The West Wing about a Democratic president, and we are like a lifetime from that, because the sole goal of this particular presidency, as it was applied to so many things, and definitely this press secretary, is, are you a good liar? And I'm talking Jedi level, and she's a terrible, terrible person, but she seems to be able to lie like that.
So we're back to Aaron's razor. It's just demonic, bro, right?
Yep.
I mean, he was a liar from the beginning. He's the father of lies. Isn't that essentially what?
And here's the question, and it's so important. That's beyond rhetoric. Why is he the father? Because once you distance yourself from the ultimate truth, which is God, which is what Lucifer is doing, what incentive do you have to tell the truth? Right. You're actually, from an evil point of view, you're insane to tell the truth. You must lie. That's the goal. The lie is the point, as I've said. That's why she's been excellent as what she's done, but it should also clue you into how terrible the goals of progressivism are.
Which brings us back to Adam's note to close this out. Let's find out. Let's find out when we get involved and take a stand. Let's find out what happens. Everybody have a great weekend. Relax. The war will be back here again on Monday, I promise. Until then, John 3:17.